Our files are confidential, Mr. Barish, so I can't show you evidence. Suffice it to say that Miss Kraczynski was not happy, and she wanted to move on. We provide that possibility.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Hollywood Gold. I'm your host, Daniela Taplin-Lundberg, and I'm here with my right-hand woman, Becca Camerata. She's rubbing her eyes. She's super excited.
I'm so happy you guys can't. There's no video component to this because we are in the throes of prep on our movie.
We are. We're like deep in it. We're 2 weeks out on our movie with Michael Keaton and Mila Kunis. I feel like we've been talking about that a lot, but it's been a while since we've actually been in the throes of a film. So we're excited. We're tired. It's all of it. And we think it's going to be really good. We feel good about it. Our writer-director, she's just the tops. She's great. Yeah. And the whole crew is really great. We got this director of photography, Jamie Ramsey, who just shot the movie Living with Bill Nighy, and he's like such a genius, and he's come over from the UK to shoot our film. And so we've just got this top-tier crew, and everyone's doing their job, and that's always a great feeling. But, you know, nevertheless, it's a lot of work. But today we're very excited. We're doing an interview with Anthony Bregman, who's just like one of the most prolific producers living. I don't know how he does it, but he's going to talk about Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which honestly is one of the great films of the early aughts. I mean, just
incredible.
Classic Charlie Kaufman, Michel Gondry at his like height. Just the story is so bonkers and amazing, and I cannot wait to hear him tell it. So without further ado, let's get going, Bex. My good friend Anthony Bregman. I'm so excited that you finally agreed to do this.
I was happy to do it. We were just doing a lot of...
It took me a couple shots because you make a lot of movies and we're all very jealous of you. But I'm so excited to be talking about Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind today. I just rewatched it yesterday and it's so good. There's so many things to talk about. You were the lead producer on the film, or one of the lead producers on the film.
It was Steve's film. Steve Gallin was the person who developed it with Michel and Charlie. And I had heard of it because I did another film that I produced, which Charlie wrote and Michel directed, called Human Nature.
Right.
That was a super fun film.
Yes.
I think an underrated movie. And a really bizarre movie.
So this all happened before Eternal Sunshine?
Yeah, 2000 we shot that.
Okay.
And then, I met Steve, came by to just like say hi on the movie, and we shot it in LA. And so it was, working with Michel and Charlie, who are sometimes like completely at each other's throats.
I can't wait to talk about that. Okay.
But in a really constructive way.
Okay.
I had heard of this movie. In fact, once we went to meet with, I think USA Films before Fine Line came on board, and we were meeting with the different places, and USA Films, which eventually became Focus, this was in development with them. And it was clear, it was me and Michel and Charlie. I think also maybe Spike Jones, who was a producer on Human Nature. We were kind of like just talking about this movie, and it's clear they had no interest in the movie, in Human Nature. And all they wanted to do was talk about the Memory Project, which I didn't even know really what it was. I had heard vaguely that Charlie was writing something else, and it was like the Memory Project. We kept trying to reroute the discussion. It's like, well, here's to talk about Human Nature. That was like the first time You
had heard about it.
Yeah, this first time I really heard about it.
So how had Steve gotten involved, and how had the project what was the seed of the project as far as you know?
So basically the project came out of a idea. You know the card that Jim Carrey finds in David Cross and Jane Addams' apartment, where it says, Clementine Kraczynski has erased Joel Barish from her memory. Please never mention their relationship to her again, or something like that. And basically, that was like an idea, an art project that Pierre Bismuth, who is a French artist, conceptual artist, friend of Michel's, had basically sent those out to friends basically as a kind of prank. And,
Okay.
and that's what, and Michelle's like, oh, I think there could be a movie there. And Michelle had like some, these ideas of like this crazy, future and past and someone with bad memory and explosions and aliens and things like that I think, and then he got Charlie, he told the idea to Charlie, and Charlie came up with this way of interpreting.
And how had Charlie and Michelle met?
Charlie had met Michelle because Charlie had the script Human Nature.
Oh, right. Okay.
I was friends with Spike Jonze, and Spike said, oh, I have this movie that I'm doing with Charlie and this director named Michelle. So I don't know if Spike had put them together, but Spike knew them both and, had already shot Being John Malkovich. And Spike kind of pulled me into that. They were collaborating on that. And then at some point in that process, they came up with this idea, and Steve, who had produced Being John Malkovich and was also really tight in this whole crowd, developed it with them.
Okay. And so talk to me about Michel, because he was sort of a rock star video ad guy. Had done a big Levi campaign that was like the most successful commercial ever, right?
I mean, you can see his music videos and his commercials on YouTube. They're phenomenal. He's incredibly creative. And, also with Eternal Sunshine, a lot of his music videos kind of loop in on themselves and have different versions of reality, and they're both emotional and intellectual. And they're, he kind of was the perfect director for Eternal Sunshine. His stuff is very whimsical. Charlie's stuff can be very dark. And kind of like putting them together kind of created this thing. And I think also Michelle was somewhat scarred by Human Nature, which didn't perform at the box office, wasn't very well received by critics. And so when we started working on Eternal Sunshine, Michel had a notebook, and he said on the left side of every page, he's going to write down what he did on Human Nature. And on the right side of each page, he's going to put down what he's going to do on Eternal Sunshine. And it's going to be the opposite.
No, stop.
So he said, whereas, Human Nature, when we made Human Nature, he had basically created these storyboards that were incredibly specific. And when we shot the movie, you could hold the storyboards up to the frame and see, oh, that is exactly,
oh my God,
100%. And not only that, but he had taken all the storyboards and then created like an animatic of the storyboards. Basically had the whole movie. We had the whole movie, with him doing, little voice here, and then kind of, and kind of voice the whole thing.
Right.
And that was the movie. It was all like storyboarded.
All preconceived.
It was all, so it was all shot-listed, all storyboarded. And basically he said, so I'm not going to storyboard anything on this one.
No.
And then it was shot-listed. He goes, I'm not going to shot-list anything. And then also he had used all of his crew that he had worked with on his music videos and stuff before, a lot of whom are, great artists. Yeah. But he was like, I want to like totally abdicate that and work with all these new people. And I was like, great, because my friend Ellen Curris, who's one of my oldest friends, I was like, she should shoot it. And he's like, great. And we kind of built the crew up in a totally
So he was starting fresh.
Way.
It was like, I'm doing this all fresh.
Totally, yeah.
And did that make you nervous at all that he wasn't shot listing or he storyboarding?
No, I thought it was great. I mean, there was like a number of things that resulted from that. I think there's a lot of things that kind of that had like domino effects. This movie is so much about emotion and about grounded characters and, performance. And so not having the storyboards didn't restrict or kind of like limit his, what was happening in the frame. And so it really loosened it up. And also for Ellen, who's just one of the great DPs ever lived. Like she's such like a strong DP with like, intuitive framing and lighting. And so we had developed this camera approach that at the time was very innovative, in terms of American features, which were when they're a big budget film, they're on sticks or on dollies and cranes and
very
stuff like
smooth.
that. And when they're, these tiny little, indie guerrilla movies, then it's kind of jumping around. But there hadn't been like a movie that was a bigger budget, which for us, this was a huge budget.
What was it, like 20?
It was like 20. And also with like, huge stars like Jim Carrey and Kate Winslet, who were the top stars in Hollywood at the time. Like that idea of a loose camera and not kind of like, storyboarding out, making it look like it was low budget was like a little bit like,
Yeah.
You have a budget. Why
Yeah.
are you making it look like that?
Right, right.
Even though for us that worked in terms of both Michelle's right hand, left hand of like
Yeah.
what I did on Human Nature.
Yeah,
I did
yeah,
the opposite
totally
here, but
intentional.
Also,
Yeah.
because the idea of this handheld camera also came out of a few other reasons. One of them was that we wanted to loosen up control of how the set was functioning.
Okay.
When you go to a set, you do the master,
Sure.
and then you do the over the shoulder,
Sure.
and then the other over the shoulder,
Yeah.
and then the close up and a close up, maybe some two shots and stuff like that. And we felt that because of the power like imbalance in this movie, that would create like a problem for Michel to really kind of like control what was going on set. So we created all these different rules to kind of loosen up the power structure on set. And one
What
of the
do
rules,
you mean, like power structure? Like the actors? Like, what do you mean by that?
we didn't want somebody to say, okay, start with my close-up. Okay, and now we're going to do my close-up until I'm done with it, and then we'll turn the camera around. Because then it's like, who's controlling that set? And one of the things we wanted to do was, because we were, at the time, we were young, we were really considered ourselves to be just punks.
Yeah.
And we were given this big budget, and we thought like, we have this huge stars in this movie.
Yeah.
How do we like make sure that we're controlling what's going on and Michel's getting what he wants?
I'm loving this.
And one of the ways we did that was by saying, we're not having any traditional setups.
Okay.
The way we're going to do it is we're going to have two cameras all the time.
Mm-hmm.
These are the rules that we laid out.
Okay.
We have two cameras all the time. And this was in the days of film.
Okay.
Where we shot, so it's like 10-minute rolls.
Sure. So expensive.
And we said, well, the way we're going to do it is the two operators are going to have earwigs, and Michel is going to have two clamshell monitors. So he'll see what both of them are doing, and he's going to be in like a separate room. He's not going to be right there. And the way that we're going to decide what the setups are is he's just going to tell them, he's going to whisper it to them through their earwig, while they're shooting. So basically while they're shooting, he'd be going, okay, Chris, now back up into a 2-shot. Okay, now go into a close-up.
Oh my God.
Go into a close-up of Kate. Okay, Peter, now go to like a
So
close-up of
rockstar.
Jim. Now go back to a close-up
Yeah,
of Kate.
yeah.
And he was doing it the whole time so that every shot was every setup.
Okay.
Every camera had a close-up, had a, over the shoulder, had dirty. Half of the shots had the other camera in it, so you couldn't use pieces of it. And everything was so decentralized that nobody knew what was going on except for Michel. And also, he never yelled action, and he never yelled cut. That was another rule, is that, and we what we basically said is we gave Mike Hausman, our AD, a little bell, and that he just had this little bell which just signified everyone had to shut up, so that, because we're rolling now, and then we're rolling, and the actors didn't really know, and then it's like, okay, I guess we're starting the scene and we're shooting the scene. And it was always like 10 minutes long because we didn't stop shooting until the roll ran out.
I'm dying.
So we would go back and start like doing, he'd say, okay, now everybody go. Okay, back to the beginning. Let's do it from the beginning. And everyone's like, oh, okay. And then people would kind of shuffle in, and the hair and the makeup people would come in and go, no, everybody away. And then we'd be shooting again. And then it would go into like the close-ups and the singles and the masters and the wides and like all those things.
But all
were
happening
happening at once. Until we kind of like ran out of the next one, until we ran out of that roll, and then we'd cut, when we wouldn't really yell cut. We joke, he never yelled action, never yelled cut in the entire movie.
Oh my God, it's so French.
And every shot was every setup, and everything was like so like chaotic in that way that like people were kind of like thrown into the scene in a way that didn't allow them to compose, because it was and it was like a very interesting thing, especially for Jim, because a very different type of role that Jim had. And prior to shooting, I think Michel visited Jim on the set, I think, of Bruce Almighty.
Okay.
And he was doing some scene where he was doing like, incredible Jim comedy thing. And he would do the scene, I think going down a stairs or something like that. And then he'd hit the stairs, they yell cut. And as Michel told me, he said that Jim would be like exhausted at the end.
Right.
And he would like trudge back up the stairs, kind of, probably, he's a real perfectionist. So probably beating himself up for something he did wrong, or, and like, trying to do it better. And then he'd be back on when they yelled action. And Michel was like, Joel Barish is Jim Carrey walking up the stairs. That's the guy I want for the movie. And so it was like trying to, it was how do we destabilize it so he can't prepare,
right?
And he can't do the Jim Carrey thing, and part of the the camera setup stuff was designed to do that. And
but did Jim buck against this at first?
Hated it. He hated it, and he was like. We knew he was going to hate it because, obviously his he's the biggest star in the world.
Totally.
In control of every set.
Totally.
And here we were kind of pulling that away. And who the fuck were we to do that? Which he would have a good point about that.
Right.
And so he was, he would like storm out and scream at me, and call me all sorts of things.
My God.
And I would like just be there to absorb it.
Sure.
And he's like, "This is like the worst set I've ever been on. I don't know what the fuck is going on." And we're like, "No, it's all good. It's all good."
Yeah.
And it's like, this is what we want. We're getting great stuff. And then here's like all the domino effects.
Sure.
Because we were doing this way. We were budgeted for like 5,000 feet of film a day.
Sure.
7,500 maybe.
Pretty healthy. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very healthy at that time.
Yeah.
So our first day we shot 25,000 feet. Our second day we shot 25,000 feet. And the Bond company was like,
you're going to run out of
be
contingency.
going over by $1 million just on film.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
And plus you're doing long days and things
God.
like that. And we're like, we'll cover it and we'll find ways. And, and also all that footage went to our editor, a traditional editor, someone who had won Academy Awards and was like a big time editor.
Lucky to get him. Like you're,
lucky
at the
to
time.
get her. But it was not at all what she was used to. And the editor assistant, because every shot was every setup, couldn't organize
the bay.
Organize the folders for the footage in a traditional way, because usually you say, okay, here's all of the singles of Kate, here's all the singles, here's the dirty single, here's the clean, here's the masters, and so then you can say, okay, I'm going to go from a master to this.
Yes.
But every shot was every shot.
Oh, God.
And so the first day footage after 10 days had not been cut. And we also were like, this is so cool. It looks so good. But we had no idea whether it was
cut together.
Whether it was going to cut together, because it's so, they were like, sometimes like these scenes, you can only see the back of their heads and all these things. And we had no idea it was going to cut. And Jim and then Kate were both getting really nervous about it.
Oh my God.
And the editor who we had basically had the equivalent of a nervous breakdown.
Oh no, it's so funny.
And we had to let her go.
Oh my God.
And we had no editor. And so then, and Jim and Kate at one point, this is like 10 days or so into it, they said, can you come to Kate's trailer? So Steve and I went to Kate's trailer, and they were like, is everything okay? And they were like, we're really concerned that this movie isn't going to make any sense. And we're like, what are you talking about? And they're like, have you seen the scenes? And we're like, yeah, we see the dailies are incredible. And it's like, they're so good. It's like that. And they're like, no. Have you seen the scenes cut together? And at that point, we hadn't seen anything cut together. Our editor had a nervous breakdown. We had no editor.
Oh my God.
Because of the footage, which was so chaotic and crazy. Steve, who's like a master producer and one of my favorite people on earth, he passed away,
May he rest in peace.
Sadly, a couple years ago, and he was masterful of this. Basically, he basically said, "Look, I'm going to be honest with you," and they're like, "Okay," and I was like, "Oh boy, here's where the movie falls apart," and Steve goes, it's incredible. The scenes are incredible. They cut together perfectly. We're making something like we've never seen before. And they're like, oh my God, I'm so relieved to hear that. And Steve was like, yeah, we're like, we think everything's going perfectly right. And they're like, it's great.
P.T. Barnum over there, just like juggling.
And so we knew that Jim was going to be not entirely comfortable with the way we were shooting. So we had scheduled this one scene. I don't know if you remember it, but you probably did because you just saw the movie. There's a scene where he comes into Lacuna, where Jim comes into Lacuna, and he's got Kate,
Yeah.
And he goes through the door and he comes in and he looks over to Tom, and the camera is holding on him, and then the camera's inside the conference room, and it pans over to Tom, and then it pans over to Jim, and so Jim is looking at Jim.
Yes.
And so Jim has like his coat and his scarf and his hat on. And then when the camera pans to him, he's just sitting there because he's reliving the earlier memory of him being interviewed. And the way we said we're going to do that is basically we're going to build David Cross's apartment, David and James' apartment in the street. We're going to rebuild it in the street outside of the Lacuna, and then have him walk into Lacuna in one shot. And walk into Lacuna and then do that. And then as the camera's panning and when we're in the conference room, as the camera's panning from Jim to Tom, we're going to have a dresser behind the camera take Jim's hat off and his scarf off and his coat off. So he'll be sitting in the place.
Okay.
And so the camera then would go to him. And then the camera pans back to Tom and back to Jim again, and he's got his coat on. So we'd have Jim behind the camera, put his coat, his scarf, and his coat on, and his hat on, and be there. And then it kind of pans back around. You take it back off, and then it pans over to Elijah, who's like dropped some files, and then it, and all in one shot. And we said that's all we had scheduled for the day. And we thought if we can get this shot, it'll be such like a celebratory moment. Everyone will be on board. We were like, it'll be like summer stock. It'll be, something that like suddenly, so we spent a few hours preparing for the shot, and there's all these things where like, when it pans back to Jim, he's not holding Kate anymore. He's holding Ellen Kurris's hand, but her face is kind of obscured. And so there's all sorts of like in-camera tricks that we're doing. And so then we shot it, didn't get it, shot it, something went wrong, shot it, something went wrong. We shot it, we got it on the 9th take, and then on like the 13th take. And when we got it on the 9th take, Jim was so like, this is fucking great, and loved it.
He was so into it.
And then on the 13th take, everyone was like clapping, and then Jim took the whole crew out for drinks. It was a second Friday, so it was a weekend.
The best.
So and then by then he was like, okay, I get it. You guys are not a bunch of fucking clowns.
My name's Clementine, by the way.
I'm Joel.
Hi, Joel. No jokes about my name. Oh, no. You wouldn't do that. You're trying to be nice.
For adults with Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis symptoms, every choice matters. Tremfya offers self-injection or intravenous infusion from the start. Tremfya is administered as injections under the skin or infusions through a vein every 4 weeks, followed by injections under the skin every 4 or 8 weeks. If your doctor decides that you can self-inject Tremfya, proper training is required. Tremfya is a prescription medicine used to treat adults with moderately to severely active Crohn's disease and adults with moderately to severely active ulcerative colitis. Serious allergic reactions and increased risk of infections and liver problems may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and tuberculosis. Tell your doctor if you have an infection, flu-like symptoms, or if you need a vaccine. Explore what's possible. Ask your doctor about Tremfya today. Call 1-800-526-7736 to learn more, or visit tremfyaradio.com.
Are we like those bored couples you feel sorry for in restaurants? Are we the dining dead?
Can I just ask you, you're a young producer. When you're getting drilled in the corner by Jim Carrey, are you like shaking in your boots, or are you just like, no, I believe in this. I know this is going to work. Like, talk through your sort of, mental state.
I was younger. It was a long time ago.
Well, you're still young, so it's pretty.
But I'd already been yelled at by a lot of people and had to go up against a lot of people, both of power or big stars. I had one star like threw a shoe at me. So I'd been through a lot already. And so I wasn't, and also I think we were all, it was like I grew up making movies at Good Machine. And we were all punks, and we all we all kind of said, we'll do it our way, and we can take all the stuff that gets thrown at us. And it was never, Jim could get very loud and he was very powerful. But I think in the end, he wasn't doing, he was getting paid like $20 million to do movies like Bruce Almighty.
Right.
We were paying him a tiny, tiny fraction of that.
Yeah.
And I had, like an early conversation with him basically saying, look, the only reason any of us are in it is because we want to make a good movie. You're not in it for the money. We're not in it for the money.
Right.
We're only in it because we think there's like a really great movie that we can make here.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it's like we're all working for the movie. And Jim, who, I really like and did a spectacular performance. I don't want to paint him out to be,
Sure.
but he was like, I think very insecure at the beginning in a way that was like almost designed to make him insecure.
Yes.
And so I knew that there was going to be blowback from that.
Yeah.
And so, you just take it.
I interviewed Jen Todd about Memento, and she was like, it read like stereo instructions. Like when you go into something like that with a young filmmaker like Chris Nolan, you're not necessarily sure every day what's going on, but you have to trust that they are. Were you so clear on the film when you went into it, or were there days where
we were discovering, when I said that the camera style came out of our desire to decentralize power on set.
Yeah.
I said it was that and one other thing. And the other thing was basically what we were experimenting with and thinking a lot about during the entire prep period and during the entire shoot and then during editing.
Right.
Which was the question of what does a memory feel like?
Mm-hmm.
What is a memory? Mm-hmm. And we did a lot of experiments. Basically every Friday we would do camera tests where we would say like, maybe a memory is like sand, like blowing away for something and revealing. And then we would do sand, like, and then, shoot it and then blow it away and then see what that looked like if we put that on top of an image and kind of like did a double exposure with that and did with water and all sorts of things. And basically every Friday was, Ellen and Michel and a small crew kind of like in one of the empty rooms in our office, figuring out what a memory looked like. And we did all sorts of things too. I remember one time we got everybody in the office, the scene where Jim is walking into Lacuna with his garbage bag full of his mementos.
Yeah.
When he walks across the street, there's a truck, a UPS truck that like almost hits him.
Yeah.
Right. And then we go back to that a couple of times more.
Yes.
There's reality, there's real time, and then there's brain time, and with different types of lighting and that. But there's always that moment of like almost being hit by that truck. So we said, well, part of our experimenting to try to find what a memory feels like, we got everybody in the office to come into the conference room. We said, okay, we gave everyone a piece of paper and a pencil, and we said, draw the UPS logo, which everybody has seen 100,000 times in their lives.
Yes.
So what does your memory of the UPS logo look like? And it was amazing. And we I had them all up on the wall of my office because not a single one of them looked alike and not a single one of them was accurate. Even like people in the art department, and stuff like that. So we were like saying, well, what, so how does memory work in that way when you're looking back?
Yes.
And Charlie had like laid down an incredible challenge in the script where he was basically, a bunch of times, like whenever the memory is going away or getting zapped, the scene happens and then he'll write at the end, the memory turns into a husk or the memory decays. And so we were like, what does that mean?
Sure.
How does it? And so a lot of times that was like, that's an in-camera thing. A lot of times it's, removing books from shelves or turning, like in the bookstore, turning the books around so that you just see the white spine instead of the spine.
Yeah.
Or sometimes it had to do, like Ellen had this, like a headlight cam, which we used to just be, like sometimes your memory of something is just the person's face and everything goes off. So we put a headlight on the front of the camera. And so it's full of those experiments.
Yes.
And one of those experiments was also, it's like, does our memory work on a crane? Does our memory work on sticks?
Right.
Does our memory of something, is that something that is solid or, a dolly move, an incredibly
Seamless.
basic and, move that's used in film all the time is not part of our experience of life. It's not part of our experience of our memories.
Yes.
And so we said that, like, so part of it, like, not only is the handheld camera going to decentralize the power, but also the handheld camera is going to be the language of the movie to mimic what memory is.
Yes.
And we made it a total rule that the camera could never be, even when we did have one dolly shot on the beach.
Yeah.
But even on the dolly shot, I mean, not a dolly shot,
Crane.
we did have a dolly shot and a crane shot. But even on the dolly and the crane, when the camera was being handheld during that, so that it didn't feel like it was steady in an unnatural movie way, and it felt like it really came from the human mind,
Totally.
from memory and imagination.
Unbelievable. I mean, another thing I just was so curious about watching it this time through, and this seems like a small thing, but her hair.
Yeah.
Kate's hair. It felt like a huge Megillah to me. Was that
It was
her real
massive.
hair? Were you
it
always
was, no,
dying?
No, there were all sorts of different wigs.
Wigs, okay,
And we
okay.
had a, like there were times when we felt like the movie was about like her hair, because it took hours to change her hair from one to the other. So you couldn't go from like, orange to red to blue in the same day, even if locations necessitated that.
Right.
And we really wanted everything to feel so grounded. One of the things that we're struggling with is that it's a grounded movie. It's emotional. It's real. It's about characters. It's something that we really want people to feel. And at the same time, it's a very high concept.
Yeah.
So with a movie like that, we said we have to do whatever we can to bury the concept.
Yeah.
It is a high concept.
Yeah.
Memory erasing.
Yes.
Which is actually a high concept that is now possible.
Yes.
But back then it just felt like we don't want it to be, like something that feels like a Hollywood gimmick. So the way we bury it is by making it completely real.
Yeah.
And so we said everything is going to be real locations.
Yeah.
And in the points in which we have to create sets, we're going to first shoot on the real location. Like Jim's apartment was really in a real location.
Yeah.
But then we needed at certain points to have that location be a set.
Yes.
So we're going to design the sets to be exactly what the real location looks like. And we're going to kind of tie our hands with it by shooting in the real location and then shooting in the sets. So for instance, when Kate leaves Jim, after she shows up drunk, having wrecked his car.
Yeah.
So in the scene where they get into a fight and he says something really nasty and she's like, all right, I'm out of here. And so she goes into the bathroom and he goes into the bathroom and she's not there. Right. And then he comes out, he looks confused, comes out and he sees her, she's in the kitchen and then he follows her in the kitchen. And then the camera swivels around to the front door and she goes impossibly fast from the back of the kitchen through the living room to the door. And that's kind of how memory works. It's like you think you have like this one moment and then another moment and another moment. You don't have like the middle moment of not seeing her.
Right.
And so how do we mimic that? And basically the way we mimic that was by recreating the actual location as a set on our stage in Bayonne, New Jersey, and then have these fake doors, have these fake walls with like secret passageways through them so she can get from one point to another point to another point. And that way,
oh my God.
And also like when it would rain inside the apartment, we couldn't do that to the real apartment, but we could do that on the set. And so then we'd have the rain, so we were able to hose it down.
So this is a question just upon this viewing that I had. Is there a master code? Like the hair, I come back to the hair. Did the red represent reality, whereas the orange represented like a memory?
If there was meaning with the colors, I'm not aware of it.
Okay.
But basically the hair was there to help us with the chronology, because we did all sorts of tricks to kind of establish what the chronology is. And so, she has her blue ruined hair at the end. So, and there's the red and the orange and stuff. And maybe those colors, maybe there is significance to those colors. But it was basically there to kind of, first of all, show Clementine's character of, she's here and she's there. And then also to be able to say, well, this is that period. Yeah. So that creates that logic of house. The timeline was very confusing to people. It's kind of weird when you look back at it now, I think the way we read films has matured significantly over the last 20 years. And, when I show this film to my kids, I don't think they have a problem following it at all.
Totally.
But back then, particularly on paper, a lot of people like read the script and were like, I have no idea what it's about. And basically when I Mike Hausman, who was our first AD, he's like a legendary producer who I'd known because we both taught at Columbia Film School at the same time. And he had made this movie Man on the Moon with Jim. And so when we started, before we started the movie, Mike, can I take you out to lunch and tell me about your experience and, what I need to know? I sent him the script, and he had said to me, like, why didn't you hire me to line produce? And I said, Mike, I'm not going to hire you to line produce this movie. You're, an Oscar-winning producer. I'm not, and he was like, I would have done it. And so when he was telling me about Man on the Moon, I was like, well, you used to first AD, right? Before you were a line producer, before you were a producer. And he's like, yeah. I said, well, do you want to AD this movie? And he's like, well, I haven't AD'd in like 20 years. And I was like, well, come out of retirement and do it. And so I got him to do it.
No, stop.
And when he read the script, he was like, what? I don't understand what the script is. And so I brought it, like at that time, I was explaining the movie to a lot of people. And I had a thing where I just carried around a Sharpie with me. And if I was like at a coffee shop or something, like I was with Mike, I would just unfurl the napkin and I draw a line and I say, here's where scene 1 happens, and here's where scene 2 happens, and then kind of show the timeline of it with, just as like creating a visual chronology, and saying, so here you're in real time and now it's moving backwards. But at the meantime, the memory operation is moving forward. And you have, and that was kind of how we would do it. But I think now, people would read the script and would see it.
Yes.
Know?
No,
but
we're
it was
so much more
important to us at the
sophisticated
point that we not do, like, we didn't say, like, okay, in the real time footage, it's going to be sticks and dolly moves. And, and that way it's an easy visual signifier that we're in real time as opposed to brain time. But we felt that was like an abdication of the work that we wanted the viewer to put into the movie to figure it out. And so we didn't use different lighting. We didn't use different.
So cool.
We didn't use different camera moves. It was all kind of like it's in the script.
You just got to figure it out.
The script is the script is solid. And it has an incredible internal logic.
Right.
And so you're going to have to figure it out.
Right.
And I think, and when we were editing the movie, I know I'm jumping all over the place.
No, you're a little. You're a product
when we were editing the movie,
forebears,
we found that there were scenes that converted people to understanding how things worked. Because in the beginning, you're not supposed to understand it. He's on a train, he meets this girl, then he's crying in the car. Patrick, the Elijah Wood character is like knocked on the door. We don't know who he is.
Yes.
And then is crying on the car. And then it goes into these memories. You're supposed to be lost. Mm-hmm. You're supposed to be, because we want you to be figuring, you, the viewer, to be figuring things out and have the satisfaction of understanding how it all works.
Yeah.
And we found that the memory mapping scene where Jim is in Lacuna and he's, having brought the garbage bag full of his mementos, and Mark is like showing him the mug and showing him the potato heads and the, all those memories. At that point, probably like 50% of everybody gets it, and there was like a certain modularity to that scene because you're otherwise doing memories. So you can put memories going back and you can take that scene. And if you moved it up earlier in the cut, so it happened in like 15 minutes, then people would understand it earlier, but then it kind of flattens out. And if you moved it too far back, then people will be so lost that they'll give up on it. And so we found like, this position for it, which was like at about 35 minutes of the movie that felt like, 20% of the people at that point will just not get the movie. They probably shouldn't have gone to see it in the first place.
Sure.
And they're not going to get it. But if we put it at 35 minutes, most of the people who are meant to be in this movie, are going to get it.
Yeah.
And will still be interested in it.
Is there any risk of brain damage?
Well, technically speaking, the procedure is brain damage, but it's on a par with a night of heavy drinking.
This is it, Joel. It's gonna be gone soon.
I know.
What do we do?
Enjoy it.
There are so many movies that have plenty of brilliance that never take shape, right?
Yeah.
There are so many films that are like, well, there are brilliant moments, but it makes no sense. It doesn't hang together. People don't get it. How did that happen?
I think it just happened progressively. There is no, I think we kind of would show the movie. We had some test screenings. Mm-hmm. The early test screenings, people were like, it's very pretty. Jim is funny. There was one test screening that we had, when Michel said, I'll do the Q&A on this. And he stood in the front of the screening room. It's a Broadway screening room. So like 80 people there.
Yeah.
And he goes, so what did you think of this? Did this? And someone would come up with like, I didn't understand that. And he'd go, and what do you do for a living? And the person would say, well, I'm a pediatrician. And he goes, okay. He was like, thanks for your thought. Like, if I have any, questions about child medicine, I'll ask you.
Oh my God.
So he would shame everybody into shutting up.
Yeah. That was probably super effective.
It was very funny. It was actually, in retrospect, it's a lot funnier than it was at the time. When we were like, why are we doing this
there's so
screening?
much laughter and humor now, but I can't imagine at the time how painful
it was fun.
are.
I mean, it was fun. Like, Michel is really funny.
Yeah.
And he's also self-deprecating. Charlie is just the smartest person on the face of the earth and can see through anything, has an incredible bullshit detector.
Yeah.
Steve is incredibly warm and wise and calm and everything.
Okay.
And so it was a really fun working group.
We never even talked about how you guys got it set up. It's like a whole other thing.
Well, it was set up at USA. I mean, basically, it was set up at USA.
Okay.
Like I said before. And then basically, I was with Good Machine for like 11 years, which was Ted Hope and James Schamus and David Lindy.
Yeah.
And then in 2002, which is a whole other story, we sold Good Machine to Universal. And they merged the international sales operation, which David Lindy was heading, which had been doing all the international sales on the USA films, into USA Films, and formed Focus out of it.
Right.
And then Ted Hope and Carrey and myself formed This Is That, which was a production company.
Yep.
And then James Schamus and David Lindy were the heads of Focus.
Right.
And we all shared an office at the time.
Okay.
At that point, I think either Charlie sent me the script or James sent me the script. Maybe James sent me the script.
Okay.
And he said, you should read the script. It's so good. And I read the script and I was like, oh my God, this incredible script. This is your memory project.
Okay.
And so I said to Charlie, I was like, this is the best script I've ever read. And it's the perfect love story because it ends at the beginning.
Yes.
Ends with the first flush of love and all the possibility. And that's the end. And so that is incorporated. And he goes, yeah, well, too bad it's never going to get made. And I was like, why? And he said, because it's like budgeted at $35 million to shoot in Toronto. And, and so I walked over to James's office, which was like 30 feet away. And I was like, you can't, he goes, well, like, we have to make the movie like $20 million.
Yeah.
And I said, well, here's how you make it at $20 million. And one of the ways coincided with what we eventually thought of as a way to ground the movie, which is like you shoot it on location. You don't build everything, just shoot it on all locations. And he's like, well, can you budget it out? And I said, yeah, I'll budget it out. So I budgeted it out at $20 million.
Brilliant.
And I said, and here's how you do it. And you
Yeah.
have more of a guerrilla crew. And then in the end, the production needs of the movie completely dovetailed into the creative needs of the movie. And we kind of came at it from both directions.
Yeah.
But basically James said, well, let me talk to like Steve. And Steve was super magnanimous. He goes, yeah, great, come on board. And we had known each other a little bit.
Okay, got it.
And then we got to be very close, obviously, during the making of the movie.
Yeah.
And James was like, okay, let's make the movie and let's show it to the physical production people. So the physical production people at Focus at the time, I don't remember who they were.
Yeah.
But basically, they tore the budget apart.
Your budget,
and,
okay,
they were like, you're going to go like $20,000 over on this, and you're going to go $50,000 over on that.
Yeah.
And you change this thing. I'm like, okay, but now the budget's back at 35. It's like, what do you want? Do you want to make the movie or not? And they're like, well, we want to make the movie responsibly. I'm like, I'm telling you, I can make this movie at this budget.
Okay.
If you're telling me.
Love it.
And so I said to James, I'm like, James, we're working together for 11 years. You know what I can do. So if they keep rewriting my budget at $35 million, then the movie's just not going to get made.
Yeah.
Like, and James is like, yeah. And because this is a world that James had come from as well.
Sure.
And so the day after I had the conversation, the next day, I was getting back on the phone with the physical production people, but they were fired. James had basically gotten rid of them. And he brought in like a new crew, a new head of production, a new head of physical production, who was somebody who we had known from, because he had worked with the Bond company.
Okay.
And so he, I had known him and he'd known me. He still kind of rode my ass, for the next 6 months.
Yeah.
But we,
you were like,
the movie on budget.
Sure.
Oh my God. And we got it done in that way.
That's incredible. And then like, just talk quickly about attaching like the most stellar cast. I mean, just rewatching it, I was like, everyone was the best actor for the part. I mean, I couldn't even believe it.
Jim and Kate were on it from the. I think Jim's agent had like slipped him the script before, because he was at that point at UTA, which and Michelle and Charlie were also at UTA. And Kate, I don't remember, but she was also on even before. I had those conversations. But Jeannie McCarthy, who
such a great casting
worked
director.
with, who's I've worked with a million times, and who's one of the greatest, judges of actors, and fantastic. She, all these people like Mark Ruffalo, Elijah Wood, Tom Wilkinson, Kirsten Dunst, everyone was like, was perfect for it, and you can't even picture the movie any other way now.
It's so incredible, because it's like, for me, like I didn't even realize 2005 seems sort of late for it to come out, but that's, I guess, when it came out. But I remember when it came out so clearly, because it was just the coolest movie. This was the pinnacle of like what filmmaking should be. When it came out, did you sort of feel like, oh, this is one for the ages? Like, did you get that feel?
I think we knew, but like by the time we finished it, and there's, all sorts of other things that probably volume 2 of this.
Yeah, sure. I know.
In terms of sound and music,
so much,
and all those things of that, which were all centered on like, what does a memory feel like?
Yeah.
And we knew we had made like a great movie.
Yeah.
Or at least we had made a movie for us.
Yeah.
And Jim saw it and was like over the moon with it, and Kate loved it. And it came out, and it was like at a time when the old Academy, it was the old guard on the whole thing. So suffice it to say, we got nominated for all the, all these different awards, WGA, Critics' Choice, all these things. And I was at that point shooting a movie in LA, Nicole Holofcener's Friends with Money. I would go to every single one of these things.
Sure.
We would lose every single one to Sideways.
Yeah.
And I would be like in the back having like, a drink at the bar with Michael London. And I'm like, oh, you're going to go up and, get your fucking award now. And everything was like Sideways, which was a movie that, a terrific movie, but that totally pandered to critics.
Yeah.
Because it's basically saying, like, look at Paul Giamatti. And we just lost everything.
Yeah.
We lost everything. And even in the Academy Awards, we were nominated. The Kate was nominated.
Yeah.
And Charlie was nominated.
Screenplay,
And Charlie won.
Yeah, amazing.
And the reason why Charlie won is because it was a different category from Sideways.
Sure.
Sideways also won for adapted, and so that's the only reason that, because otherwise, and I think at the time, all of my friends loved the movie, got it, and recognized it, but it wasn't like the top of all the critics lists. It wasn't at the top. It had gotten very good reviews. Yeah. But we had gotten, I think I looked it up last night. It was like, we had like a 92% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Pretty
Sideways
solid.
had a 97%.
Right.
At one point, this agent had said, like, I'm not going to put this actor in your weird little art movie. And at one point, and we came out, I was like, maybe we did make a weird little art movie. It made $35 million, not, nowhere near what Sideways made.
Yeah,
which is
certainly
good.
respectable.
It was very good.
Yeah.
It should have made $1 billion.
Yeah.
In my opinion. But I think people, like, A, weren't totally ready for it, and B, they didn't recognize it for what it was. And I think I remember in 2009, which is 5 years later, when everyone did their kind of like best of the decades list, it was the number one film for all these things. And in fact, Slate or Slant or one of these websites did like the mother of all top 10 lists for the decade. Yeah. And it was the number one film.
I can totally believe
but
that.
It wasn't the number one film in 2004.
Totally.
And I remember even the LA Film Critics Circle had done they were doing their thing. Yeah. And I remember I was on the phone with Charlie when that was happening, and it was on a website that you could see the thing as they were voting for each category. It came up, and Eternal Sunshine came up, and I was on the phone with Charlie, like, oh my God, we finally won something like that. And then it went blank, and Sideways came up. And we were like,
goddamn,
oh my God,
Sideways.
If there's not like an Eternal Sunshine version of that, that's this, you know?
Oh my God.
But then I think over the years it's recognized and people appreciate it more now than they did at the time.
But why? Do you feel like you were like a little too early? Like you were sort of breaking ground and people weren't quite ready for it? Or like why years later?
I think that there is a lot of like that, you know, people there. I mean, a lot of people love the movie and the people who, you know, in the end of the day, you make the movies for the people who are important to you.
Yep.
You know, and hopefully there's enough of them that they can justify making the movie. You know, the people who, you know, I respect, you know, the people who I was making the movie for, they really got the movie in the same way that I got the movie.
Yeah.
You know, it's been 20 years now, you know, and there's a lot of changing of the guard in terms of like what people recognize. And I think there's a lot of resistance to things that are different. There are a lot of resistance to things that are new. And at that time, this was, you know, I don't know, groundbreaking or whatever you want to call it. It was different from anything that people had done before. It was shot in a different way, lit in a different way. Certainly the story was told in a different way. And I think it takes time for people to recognize that. And, you know, I've always thought that I've always actually said this, that the Academy Awards should be given 10 years later. You know, because then you have the perspective of like what a movie's done. And sometimes you look back at the Academy Awards, you're like, oh my God, that movie?
We gave it to that?
Movie had no staying power. Like you look on IMDb, like how many people are actually interested in that movie? How many people call that movie up? Very few, you know, versus the thing. And I think that the perspective of what has, you know, really made an impact in the film world and what has, you know, had lasting power, and like what, you know, posters are up in the film schools. Like what are people like aiming for? Like what are the, you know, when people say like, oh, I made a, you know, you should read this script. It's kind of an Eternal Sunshine, you know, type thing. Not that that's like necessarily the greatest thing, but that's absolutely, but I think that's like what, I think that sort of, you know, the influence of a movie isn't always apparent in the year that it's released.
Oh my God. Well, you're just like playing into my hands, because it's like the very purpose of this podcast. It's like acknowledging those movies that maybe in the moment weren't acknowledged in the way that they should have been. I mean, we did one on Election and The Ice Storm and all these movies that at the time like made 5 cents at the box office, but now have such lasting legacies. So thank you so much for doing this. You are literally the best storyteller. Like I literally did not have to prompt one question. Am I right? Like you were just like there. Thank you so much. That was incredible.
I wish I could tell you all the stories.
No, I know. We can do a part 2. I'll bring you back.
Enough.
That was awesome. That's so great. Thank you so much.
For having me.
That was so cool.
Bye, Joel.
I love you.
Maybe in one time.
Well, Bex, I have to tell you, Bregman is just, I mean, I say this for so many producers, and we talk about this a lot. Like they're sort of naturally gifted raconteurs because they have to sell, right? Like the job of producing is selling, you know, the script or the filmmaker or whatever to people who are going to finance it. So they have to sort of be able to tell stories in like really effective and visual ways. But man, that was a story. I mean, the highs and lows of that movie. And also he did all the voices. Like he imitated Michel Gondry at times and his editor at times. And I was just like so on the edge of my seat the entire time.
Biggest thing that I took away from this episode, which I really enjoyed, and he is such a great storyteller, so fun.
Yeah,
I've had funny experiences just like running into Anthony Bregman on the streets of New York, and just, you know, he's just kind of a guy that's out and about and is always busy and always doing something. And and so I'm a big fan of his, but I was so impressed with he never wavered in what he thought that the film could be. Like he saw the potential of this film, and the process of it sounded pretty insane. Like when he said that the first 2 days they shot 25,000 feet of tape a day.
I would have been peeing my pants.
I mean, I'm literally, as a producer, I would have been like, we got to shut it down, guys. This is never going to work. What are we doing?
Forget it. It's so true. I mean, the whole thing, I mean, the way he was telling it, and maybe because it is like 17 years later, it's like a little easier to retell it and just be like, yeah, it was great. But it sounded insane to me that like 25,000 feet of film a day, which is truly a normal amount of film. Not that we shoot film anymore, but like maybe like 7,000, 8,000 feet, maybe 10,000 on like a very big day. Like 25,000 feet is insane. It's obvious that Michel like never stopped. It's obvious that Jim was like uncomfortable the entire time. He had just come off of like Bruce Almighty. He was the biggest star in Hollywood. Now he was doing this smaller film for probably like scale payment and was like, what have I gotten myself into? And he wasn't allowed to do any of his Jim Carrey things. I mean, it was like that performance was so different than Ace Ventura or Bruce Almighty or any of the movies he had done. And I just can't imagine just being like, yeah, we're just going with it. And then there wasn't traditional coverage. It was like he just rolled the camera and went into a single and then went back out into a wide. I really feel for that poor editor. That feels like a death wish to me.
Well, he said that the first editor literally had a nervous breakdown and quit. Remember,
like after like 3 days. Yeah,
yeah. And I don't blame editor.
Me neither.
You know, but the fact that they were called in to Caden and Jim's trailer, and they were like, "How is it looking? Have you seen scenes?" And he was like, "Yeah, the trailers are good." And they're like, "No. Have you seen the scenes?"
And like they just cut together.
They just lied through their teeth and were like, God. Oh my gosh, that's great.
So Steve Golan, one of the all-time great producers, recently passed a couple of years ago, but just lying through his teeth, you know, like you just got to keep that train moving. What else are you going to do, right? And so,
because if they had been like, to be honest, we haven't seen anything.
Right.
Kate and Jim might have walked. You know what I mean? And then we wouldn't have been blessed with this incredible
one
movie.
of the great films. I mean, honestly,
really
I mean, anytime I mention that film, it's something that like people have such a reverence for. And I love that Michel just threw out his playbook. Like the film before Human Nature obviously wasn't, you know, as successful. And he had like shortlisted every moment. Everything was pre-planned. It was so organized, and it just, for whatever reason, it didn't work. And then he threw it completely out the window, his entire game plan, and did the opposite on this movie. And this movie, I would say, is like one of the great films of our time. I mean, truly, I feel like I can say that. I watched it again, and it was just like so mind-bending and emotional and brilliant. So it just goes to show you, like, this business, you never know. You just never know what's going to work. You know, there was one part that we didn't get to, you know, Bregman had so many great stories, but there was one part I didn't get to ask him about. But apparently I read that the Barnum and Bailey circus, the only ways to get the elephants into Manhattan was to walk them through the city and under the Holland Tunnel at night.
Oh, wow.
Because they were so enormous, there was no way to get them into the city any other way. And so like the Barnum and Bailey circus was at Madison Square Garden. And so at one point they were shooting like around there, and they heard that the elephants were walking through the city. Like they would hold each tail, and there were like 12 elephants just walking through the city at midnight. And so Michel Gondry heard that this was happening, and he was like, let's go, we're going. And so they like threw Jim Carrey and Kate Winslet into the middle of the city. All these people are watching these elephants walk through the city, and like Jim didn't know what was going on. He had Kate's hand. He didn't know who was shooting, where was shooting. There was no plan at all. And they managed to capture a moment of Jim's face where he's just lost in the crowd. And that was like always the moments he was trying to capture for Jim, because Jim was like such a studied actor. And so that part is in the film. And it's like those moments where Jim was constantly being thrown off that Michel was always trying to grab and capture, and it sort of really lent to this like amazing performance that is really just thrown off at all times. So I thought that was like such a neat moment, and I actually remember seeing that moment in the film. He feels thrilled and lost and excited, and it was clearly a moment that like, you know, was just an accident that Michel Gondry got on film. So I thought that was really, really amazing. And
that's a really, really cool story.
Yeah, I know. You got to go back and watch that.
Yeah, I have to look for that specific
Well,
moment.
Anyways, great episode. So excited to have heard all those stories. And that's movie magic, man. It could have very easily gone the other way. It seems like there were so many moments. Well, guys, another amazing episode. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Stay Gold Features. DM us, download, subscribe. We're having so much fun. This pod is just like growing and growing, and it's just like so much fun to hear these great stories about these great movies. Someone suggested we should start doing movies that are failures, and maybe we'll do that as a spinoff. But currently, we're just going to do the movies that work. But wouldn't people like to hear about like Westworld and Ishtar as well? Like maybe that's something we do.
Yes.
You know, maybe it's like
actually, I think people would love to hear about that.
Right? Like sometimes those are maybe more fun to hear about.
Let us know. Let us know, guys.
Let us
if you
know.
want us to
give
do
us
that.
some feedback. All right, guys. Well, we love you, and don't forget to stay gold. You say it too, Bex.
Stay gold.